Anakin's duel with Ventress on Yavin IV is one that oftentimes flies under the radar. Taking place in Legends in the 2003 Clone Wars series, Anakin found himself in a fight for his life against Dooku's finest assassin. Ventress at this point was a Sith perspective, and attempting desperately to prove herself worthy as being trained as one. As a result, she pushed Skywalker to his very limits in a bid to execute him. Anakin watched as she brutalized every single one of his troopers, the men that had trusted him. Anakin responded to her challenge, and what resulted was one of the most violent and brutal duels that we have ever seen. We believe this duel is incredibly underrated, not just because of how epic it was, but because of what it means for Anakin moving forward. He had gotten his first taste of the dark side on Tatooine when he had slaughtered the Tuskens, but here on Yavin IV would be the first time that he released his hatred in an actual duel. So join us today as we break down the Yavin IV duel and how Skywalker learned for the first time that anger gave him focus. Darth Sidious had engineered the Clone Wars and its events down to its finest details. He didn't just have his hand in the movements of troopers, politics, and the grand sway of the galaxy, but he would also organize specific interactions. We believe that this was one of them. Sidious was aware of Ventress once Dooku introduced her to him. He saw the way that she fought, and how she greatly aspired to be a Sith Lord. While he had absolutely no intention of ever bringing her into the fold though, her ambition would prove to be of great use to him. She would be one of the only dark acolytes that Dooku trained who ever met or interacted with Sidious. And while Dooku was the one who always gave her orders, this time it was from Palpatine. He had organized her to be dispatched against Skywalker. This was all for one goal, to force Anakin to give in to his rage. But Palpatine knew that Anakin would never do this when under the watchful eye of Obi-Wan. Palpatine wanted Anakin separated from his master and forced into a situation where only the dark side could save him. It is a classic Sith technique, one that was employed by the spirit of Frida Nad to Exar Kun many years ago. In the Outer Rim, the Battle of Moonalist was now wrapping up. The ground battle had been secured by General Kenobi, and Skywalker was taking care of the business with his fleet. But during this battle, the entirety of Blue Squadron was blown to smithereens, gone in a matter of seconds. A rogue starfighter now entered the battle, outmaneuvering all of the clone pilots. This goaded Anakin into a chase, and he quickly realized that this was no droid pilot. They were flying too well. Their shots were too precise. This could only be a Force sensitive. Sparking Anakin's interest, he took Ventress's bait and gave in to the pursuit. He ordered a squad of clones to follow him in a dropship and chased the assassin all the way to Yavin IV, which distanced himself from Kenobi and the rest of all of the Republic's support. All of this had been according to her design, as she was able to isolate the Jedi and his company. As they spread out to search for her, Ventress struck the leaves in the shadows, using the Force to take out the clones one by one. Ventress was a wraith in the dark hunting her prey. Invisible hands clutched each clone and sent them flying into the forest, drowning them in water, brutishly hammering them against tree trunks, pulling them into blind spots where they would receive an unseen fate. Belatedly, Anakin didn't realize he was alone until he heard the scream of the final trooper. Running to check on him, he arrived just in time to see the trooper die before his eyes as his transport ship exploded. Anakin commanded his astromech to call for help, but his own D-7 Delta starfighter detonated as well, obliterating R4P-22. The starfighter, nicknamed the Azure Angel, had been Anakin Skywalker's baby, the ship that he had intensively customized himself whenever he needed to do some moving meditation. R4P-22 had been his companion in the early months in the Clone Wars. This was before he was given R2-D2 by Padme to be used as a replacement. But on a worse note, his entire clone platoon had just been mercilessly slaughtered, and he was unable to lift a finger to help. In Legends continuity, this would prove to be his greatest pull to the dark side, people dying despite Anakin trying his best, and feeling as if he was helpless to save them. Immediately, anger flashed in his being as the assassin revealed herself. The duel begins with Ventress announcing her as a prospective Sith along with her intention to kill the Jedi. There is no pretense in what she is there to do. The Jedi Padawan shall die by her hand. Anakin, however, declares that he will make her pay for what she has done, and when Ventress beckons him forward, the two shed their cloaks and jump into action. What precedes is a flurry of blades in the forest. Anakin takes things with moderation as his Jedi training kicks in, tells him to hold back. His strikes are rough but measured and calculated. The assassin begins to gain the upper hand with her sheer ferocity. She throws Skywalker into a tree and jumps into a double strike, aiming to decapitate him. He dodges as her blades cut straight through a tree, causing it to topple over. The follow-through with us then tells us one thing: Ventress is not holding back at all. The duel is not like Anakin's duels with Dooku. Ventress may have been sent there as a test for Anakin, but she is very much there intending to kill him. Soon she begins to flex her powers in the dark side, hurling wood and debris at all angles. But Anakin, despite being just a Padawan, is still one of the most capable fighters in the Jedi Order. What many don't realize is that he as a Padawan was on the level of many Jedi Knights, especially after he became obsessed with lightsaber combat following his loss to Dooku. This supposedly takes place 4 months after that duel, so he's already turned his focus towards Gem So, his new preferred form. He cuts up each of the logs thrown at him and only gets hit by one. Ventress re-engages at a closer range, but Anakin shows her what he has learned. In a matter of moves, he disarms her of both her lightsabers and goes to put her down with a side talk, the lightsaber technique that cuts a being in half at the waist. Ventress avoids this by leaping into the trees, taking her lightsabers with her. Anakin follows as the two begin to clash among the treetops. They dart between the trunks like insects, clashing their sabers with every pass, but the more the fight rages on, the deeper into the jungle Ventress draws the Jedi. Eventually they make their way to the main battleground, the Massassi Temple. This all goes back to Exar Kun, the man who built these temples thousands of years prior to using his Massassi as slaves. The Massassi were a devolved subspecies of the ancient Sith purebloods. They served the Dark Lord before they went extinct, building grand monuments and temples to his honor. But of course, because the architecture had been designed by the Sith, they were geared to channel the energies of the dark side. The ancient Sith were known to build their temples in pyramidal shapes with arcane runes carved along all of the sides. These focus and tune the energies of the dark side inward, channeling it into one central location where the Dark Lord could harness it. This made any side of the temples dangerously strong with the dark side, and it's likely that Ventress subconsciously made her way there simply by following the call of the darkness. Or perhaps this too was orchestrated by Sidious, telling Ventress to lure Anakin into Yavin IV for this sole purpose. Either way, the outcome is the same. Anakin is exposed to the primal energies of the dark side located in Mortal Kombat. This is a dangerous Sith trick. Ventress manages to knock him off of the walkway that they were dueling on, sending some of the temple's flagstones flying into his face. By now, Anakin's clothes were torn and tattered, and he was beaten up pretty good. But the two combatants pause to regard one another as rain begins to fall. The Force now reflects the inner conflict within Anakin, brewing a thunderstorm in the physical world. In the novel For Revenge of the Sith, Dooku describes seeing Anakin's presence in the Force as a building thunderstorm, flashing dangerously and ready to snap at any moment. It feels appropriate that when he is in this place, a place of great ancient power, the dark side resonates with his growing anger towards Ventress, causing the storm out of nowhere. For a moment, nothing happens, but Anakin then breaks the silence and the standoff by jumping up to where she was attacking him from with the fury of stones. He strikes at her as he drives her back with heavy blows, before delivering a swift wheel kick and a force push that sends her tumbling towards the shadows. Knocking her in the shadows of the ancient Massassi structure, he follows her inside. Anakin's guard is raised since he has lost sight of his opponent, and he's right here, right where Sidious wants him, in the bowels of a Sith monument, feeding on anger and fear of the unknown. Ventress attacks him from the shadows, and the two clash blades again. Each strike resonates echoes within the fortress that hasn't felt it for a millennia. It awakens the shadows. The dark side begins to feed off of Anakin's rage. Anakin is not afraid to fight dirty on his own. He splashes Ventress in the face with water to catch her off guard. She jumps up to a staircase and summons a large pillar of stone to go flying at Anakin. But the Jedi catches the column and sends it right back, smashing her into the staircase. Now in a full panic, Ventress tosses the stone off of her and sends out a wild force push to gain distance from the bull charging towards her. Anakin is empowered by rage. He dips his shoulder and tanks right through the force push. Like a juggernaut, it barely even slows him as he makes himself immovable and charges right through. The force push he throws in return blasts Ventress off of her feet and through a solid stone structure. Now back outside the stone terraces, Anakin is the one on the offense. The assassin finds herself in a desperate series of blocks and parries while retreating away from Skywalker. Her once ferocious assault no longer avails her now. Anakin has gained momentum and refuses to give her any space. Fully on the defense, she now has no hope but to continue to give ground as she's driven to the apex of the temple. With nowhere left to run, she holds her ground and mounts a perilous counter. At last, she gets a minor victory and disarms Anakin of his weapon. But as we stated earlier, the Massassi temples gather the dark side within them. It is channeled into one central location, forming a dark side nexus. That precise central location, my friends, is the apex of the pyramid, right where Anakin and Ventress are standing. But Ventress is not the only one that has given up ground. Anakin too has been giving up ground within himself, sinking deeper into rage. Ventress attempts to hack him to pieces, but Anakin catches her hands. Now fully empowered by his hatred and rage, he torques her wrist and forces her to drop one of her blades. His eyes are closed, and he basks in the dark side as her red saber lifts to his hand. And as soon as he takes it, he releases a cry of pure fury and attacks Ventress with savage frenzy. Beating her back to the crumbling flagstones, he slams the blade onto hers over and over again. Anakin's blows have such power that the stone cracks, and his rage resounds in the Force. In the show, we get flashes of Qui-Gon, Yoda, and Obi-Wan from across the screen. This absolutely shows that the two living Jedi Masters can feel Anakin's rage in the Force, and Qui-Gon's spirit is present. Qui-Gon desperately attempting to appeal to Anakin, attempting to shake him back into his right mind. But with one last strike, the temple ruins give way, sending Ventress falling into the abyss below. Now believing that the assassin is dead, Anakin releases the rest of his rage into a scream into the red shadow of Yavin Prime, as the world of the Sith itself rejoices. The fight is now over, and the winner, Darth Sidious. This duel is one where Anakin is challenged to his most moralistic level. Sidious wanted to prove something, that when he is put in the right situation, when all that he relies on is taken from him, and he can only use himself and his own power, he just doesn't have it. His Jedi mindset disintegrates when he is pushed to the brink. Sidious needed to use Ventress to bring this out of him. She's the only one skilled enough to pose a real lethal threat to Anakin, and one to not hold back. Dooku was too powerful, and would end things quickly. This results in Anakin not being pushed this far. And this is of course the early Clone Wars. Anakin is a Padawan, and he needed a threat that could draw him into the dark side in a meaningful way. Someone disposable that could become his first casualty. For Sidious, this was always meant to be Ventress. Now of course she managed to survive this encounter, albeit barely, and because of this, she had her continued use for Sidious. But no moment would ever top the victory he gained when Anakin gave in on Yavin IV. Despite her losing, this was the best that Ventress has ever performed. And that, my friends, is why we think that this brutal duel on Yavin IV was one of the most important fights in Anakin's entire journey. The duels in the 2003 series are absolutely masterpieces. We get to experience the power, the brutality, and the sheer control of these Force sensitives. Novels describe them as moving like blurs and how fast Force speed actually makes them. And oftentimes Jedi, Dark Jedi, and Sith are far more quick in combat than we see on screen. This version of the animated show is never afraid to let the characters go crazy with their power and their Force control, which makes for very intense and interesting fights. This one, however, carries a lot of emotion and development. It begins with a level of calculation, a battle between two enemies, one that very quickly becomes a lot more violent and personal. The identity of Anakin Skywalker begins to peel away, and the dragon within him begins to emerge. The dragon that he hides from other Jedi. He is pushed to the breaking point in this duel. Now we get to see how he acts and performs when other Jedi are not around. Each time he is forced to his limit, he gives a little more ground to the dark side, compromises a little more of his Jedi resolve. It was a steady build to the moment where he decapitates Dooku on the invisible hand. Dozens of tiny cuts to his virtue as he gives in more and more to his anger. This was more than a duel. It was a moment of profound psychological fracture. Isolated and driven by desperation, Anakin was pushed to the emotional edge. The jungle echoed not only the clashing sabers, but the storm inside of Anakin. His rage, his fear, an unbearable sense of powerlessness. Ventress's blades cut into despair, cut into his deepest fears. The fear being that no matter how strong he became as a Jedi, he would always be too late to save those that he loved. Here on Yavin IV's ancient, dark-soaked soil, Anakin learned the Jedi Code would not protect him or his friends. He had tried restraint, he had tried control, and he had watched them all die. He saw the Jedi Order demand serenity when the galaxy itself demanded action. Ventress, knowingly or not, became the instrument of a terrible lesson. The Jedi way was not enough. In unleashing his fury against her, Anakin felt a different kind of strength. Violent, immediate, consuming. For the first time, he tasted what the dark side could offer. Not just power, but the illusion of control, the illusion that he could bend fate. And once he felt that, once he saw that raw emotion gave him strength, a strength that the Jedi always had denied him, there was no fully turning back. This duel did not turn Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, but it was one of the first moments where he truly began to believe that in order to protect those that he loved, he would have to embrace the darkness that the Jedi feared. We are excited to see what you guys have to think about this and say, and if you would want to see more breakdowns on duels in the Clone Wars series, please let us know down below. As always though, thank you so much for joining us today in the archives, and may the Force be with you always.